On his father's birthday, 3 children returned home, not to celebrate him, but to ask whether he had written his will yet. Henry Bennet sat quietly in an old chair by the window. His thin hands rested on a wool blanket as his eyes moved from one face to another. David, the eldest son, wore an expensive suit. Linda, the middle daughter, carried a folder filled with property documents. Mark, the youngest, had barely stepped through the door before asking how the house would be divided. No one asked whether he had eaten dinner. No one asked if his back was still hurting. No one noticed that the medicine bottle on the table had been empty for 3 days. A father left behind in his own home. After his wife passed away, Henry lived alone in the suburban house that he and his wife had spent a lifetime paying for. When he was younger, he worked 2 jobs at the same time to support his 3 children through school. He once sold his only car so David could afford college. He once pawned his wife's wedding ring so Linda could have surgery when she was a little girl. He spent countless sleepless nights caring for Mark whenever the boy suffered from a high fever. But as Henry grew old and frail, those sacrifices seemed to disappear from his children's memories. David always said he was busy with meetings. Linda said her home was not suitable for caring for an elderly parent. Mark said he was under financial pressure. Each of them had a perfectly reasonable excuse, yet none of them had time to take their father to a doctor's appointment. Only Grace, the elderly neighbor next door, occasionally brought him a bowl of soup. She was not family, yet she was the only person who noticed Henry trembling every time he stepped down from the front porch. That evening, his children organized a family meeting. They called it a discussion about their father's future, but in reality, it was a discussion about his assets. Linda opened her folder, her voice gentle but sharp as a blade. "Dad can't keep living alone forever. We think the best option is to sell this house." David immediately nodded. "We can split the money evenly and use part of it to place Dad in a nursing home." Mark frowned. "Why should it be divided equally? The youngest child has done more for Dad, so I should receive more." Henry slowly looked up. The air inside the room froze. He wanted to ask Mark when exactly he had taken care of him. Did one phone call a month count as care? Did stopping by once to pick up old belongings from the garage count as devotion? But Henry said nothing. He simply looked at the 3 children who had once fallen asleep in his arms and were now fighting over every square foot of memory. When the argument reached its peak, Grace walked into the room. In her hands was an old brown envelope. She placed it in front of Henry and quietly said, "It's time they know the truth." All 3 children immediately fell silent. Henry slowly opened the envelope. Inside were copies of the house documents, a new will, and handwritten notes from his late wife. David frowned. "What do you mean, a new will?" Henry looked at his eldest son. "I signed new paperwork 6 months ago." Linda's face turned pale. "You can't make decisions like that when your health is failing." Grace placed a set of audio recordings on the table. The doctor confirmed that he was completely of sound mind. The lawyer was present when he signed everything. Mark jumped to his feet. "Then who gets the house?" Henry stared at his children for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice hoarse but clear. "This house will not belong to people who only want it after I'm gone." According to the new will, the house had been transferred into a small community trust dedicated to supporting abandoned elderly people. Part of Henry's savings would also be used to help seniors who no longer had children willing to care for them. The 3 children sat frozen in shock. David's face turned red. "You're punishing us." Henry shook his head. "No. I'm simply stopping myself from being punished by continuing to wait for my children to love me." Linda burst into tears, but there was more fear than regret in those tears. She asked whether he could change the will back. Mark angrily insisted that outsiders had manipulated him. At that moment, Grace took out another letter. It was from their mother, written shortly before she passed away. In the letter, she wrote that she was not afraid of poverty. She was not afraid of illness. The only thing she feared was that one day her children would forget how deeply their parents had loved them. She told Henry that if their children ever returned only because of money and property, then the house should continue doing good for people who truly needed it. This time, no one could say a word. When greed faces memory, David remembered the night his father stood in the rain waiting for him after his first job interview. Linda remembered her mother's trembling hands carefully mending her dress before graduation. Mark remembered his father's comforting voice every time he was afraid of the dark. Those memories had never disappeared. They had simply been buried beneath layers of money, ambition, and indifference. Henry did not scold his children. His silence hurt them more than any accusation ever could. He said, "I don't need you to give the house back. I only want you to understand that parents are not keys that unlock a vault of inheritance. Parents are the place where you were loved long before the world even knew your name." After that day, nothing in the Bennett family remained the same. David began visiting his father every week without bringing paperwork. Linda cooked dinner for him with her own hands for the first time in many years. Mark remained silent for days, but eventually returned, placed a new box of medicine in front of his father, and offered a sincere apology. Henry did not forgive them immediately. Some wounds require time to heal, but he did not close the door. The house remained dedicated to the community trust after Henry passed away, and within those walls, many lonely elderly people eventually found a place they could call home. This is not just another family drama Reddit stories. This is a Reddit family drama story about greed, awakening, and the cost of forgetting your parents when they need you the most. In this dramatic storytelling, the most heartbreaking part is not that the children fought over an inheritance. It is that a father had to use his will to remind his children what family truly means. If this story made you think about your own parents, leave a comment below. Do you believe children deserve an inheritance if they never cared for their parents in old age? Share your thoughts, subscribe to the channel, and join us for more emotional, dramatic, and unforgettable family stories in the videos ahead.